I would like to address to you in this study as we continue to look at the subject entitled Trinity versus Anti-Trinity. It has to do with the different versions of the Bible, like the New King James Version, the NIV, the NAS, the ESV, and the ASV, and many others. All of these Bibles, as some of you may know, are part of the Counter-Reformation from the Roman Catholic Church. And as we've been looking at the history of the 1611 King James Version of the Bible, and for those of you who have a true knowledge about the history of the King James Version, how that version of the Bible came down to you and I living in the last days, you would know without a shadow of a doubt that that Bible indeed came straight from the hand of God. That does not mean that the interpreters had everything correctly as they were interpreting the Bible, but we know that those key fundamental beliefs, like for example, the Godhead, which will be our topic here we're looking at, we know that the interpreters or the translators of the King James Version had it right. Now, part of this subject here, we're going to look at a little bit 1 John chapter 5, verse 7 and verse 8. That would be the subject matter. We'll look at that a little bit. Perhaps we'll do a follow-up with that another time. But also the question that we want to ask as we go along with this study is what is the difference between Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormonism, we'll look at that another time, we'll include them another time, but Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, and the anti-Trinitarian group, or the Father-Son movement as they call themselves sometimes. What's the difference between them? Or, another question, is there a difference between those three groups that I just mentioned? And we're going to find out that based on this study here, and based on 1 John chapter 5, verse 7 and 8, and also based on these versions, these counterfeit versions that came from the Roman Catholic versions of the Bible to counteract the Reformation, we're going to find out there are a lot of similarities between not only the Roman Catholic and the anti-Trinitarian, but also the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons have a lot in common based on 1 John chapter 5, verses 7 and 8, and also based on the modern versions of the Bible. These are counterfeit versions of the Bible. So we're looking at the God's truth versus Satan's lie. All of these other Bibles, versions of the Bibles, as I mentioned, New King James, the NIV, the NAS, ESV, ASV, and all of these versions are lies. Truth partly mingled with lies. There might be 90% truth within those versions of the Bible, or 95% truth, but because of the lies, we're not just talking about some errors here and there, we're talking about changes that they have made. Yes, we know there are a little bit of errors here and there within the King James Version, but we're not talking about changes or things that were removed from the King James Versions that were included in the original manuscripts, but we don't find in the King James Versions. But these other Bibles, like the NIV, for example, they have literally removed passages, verses. And 1 John 5, 7 is one of them. And we're going to look at that in a moment. But as we move along here, let's begin, by the way, 1 John chapter 5, verse 4. 1 John chapter 5, verse 4. Notice with me the subject matter. For whatsoever is born of God. What happened to that person? Overcometh the world. And this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. Now remember, when the Bible here is talking about God here, is also referring to the Godhead. The three persons of the Godhead. Not one body with three heads, as some of the doctrines of the Roman Catholic teaches the Trinity. We're talking about three distinct beings, as the Bible tells us, and Spirit of Prophecy, and some of the writings of our pioneers. That's the background here when the Bible says, "For whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world, and this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. Who is he that overcometh the world, but he that believeth that Jesus is the Son of God? This is he that came by," notice, "water and blood, even Jesus Christ, not by water only, but by water and blood. And it is the Spirit that beareth witness, because the Spirit is truth." And this goes along with John 14:17. When Jesus, go back to John 14 with me. Keep a finger there in 1 John chapter 5. John 14, this is when Jesus began to tell the disciples about the promise of the Father to send another comforter.